Welcome to another episode of Lackawanna Pastimes. I'm Sarah Pacini, the Assistant Director at the Lackawanna Historical Society. Today's program, we're keeping it in-house a little bit. We're joined by the Executive Director of the Historical Society, Mary Ann Moran Savakinus, who'll be talking about architecture in Scranton. This is actually the second of a two-part series. The first part talks about the earlier days of architecture and city planning in Scranton, starting with Joel Amsden in the 1850s and stretching to the introduction of George M.D. Lewis and Edward Davis in the 1920s. So we'll hear more about Lewis and Davis today, and some other later architects who practiced in Scranton in more recent days. So Mary Ann, I'll turn the program over to you.
So as I said, we're going to start with Davis and Lewis because really, if you're going to talk about Scranton architecture, especially after the 1920s, you're going to talk about these two gentlemen. They're the final architects that we talked about last year, and they had a huge impact on local architecture. And this is just a short list of their work that you see on the screen. And some of their designs, when you start to look at it, it really gives you an idea of just how large the scope of their work was and how broad their influence was. It was so great, their influence on Scranton architecture, that in 2009, the University of Scranton's Hope Horn Gallery did a display just on the work of these two gentlemen. And it included some of their original plans and drawings, some of which we have in the Historical Society's collection, but the majority of them came from George M.D. Lewis's son, Edward Lewis, who was also an architect. So if you got to see that exhibit back in 2009, it was really just a fun exhibit to see. But let's talk a little bit more about them. Edward Herbst Davis was born in Washington, D.C. in 1867 and graduated from the Washington School of Fine Arts. After graduation, he worked in Washington for 3 years, then moved to Wilkes-Barre before coming to Scranton in 1892. He settled in Scranton, and his skill as a designer and a delineator had already been recognized with a medal in 1904 by the St. Louis Exposition for a design he did for the Home of the Friendless. He was an active American Institute of Architects member. He was a charter member of the Northeastern Pennsylvania chapter, and he was president of the Building Code Commission of Scranton and an early member of the State Commission for Registration of Architecture. He was also a founding member of the Scranton Society of Architects, and I'll talk a little bit about that more later, but it's really cool. His work in Scranton started primarily as focusing on residences, but then shifted to commercial. He received contracts from public schools and hospitals, including additions to the Scranton State School for the Deaf in 1913. In 1913, he designed the Union National Bank on Lackawanna and Wyoming Avenue. That's on the side there. You see that one. At the time, this was the tallest building in Scranton. It had 12 stories and was 160 feet high. It was designed with his associate partner at the time, a man named David Morgan. And they decided after they completed the building to put their offices in the building where they stayed until 1925. Now, this is where I do a little commercial because that building is actually featured in our brand new calendar, the Looking Up Scranton calendar. So it is the September page, and you get a close-up of some of the designs and gives you a little more of just how intricate the work is that they did. So in 1912, Edward Davis was asked to supervise the construction of the Church of the Good Shepherd in Greenridge. And it was during this time that he first became acquainted with George M.D. Lewis. George M.D. Lewis was born in Philadelphia in 1891 and moved to Scranton a short time later. Because he was a member of the Church of the Good Shepherd and had an interest in architecture, Davis asked him to work on some of the church interior detailing. Later, when Lewis decided to pursue the field of architecture and attend a program at the University of Pennsylvania, it was Davis who advanced a loan for his tuition, which was repaid by Lewis because he did summer work at Davis's office. Lewis then earned his master's from the U of Penn in 1917, and then his career plans were put on hold because World War I happened, and he served in World War I as an aviator under the command of Captain Fiorella LaGuardia, who was later mayor of New York City. Then he returned to Scranton after the war and was retained by Paul Beelan to design a community house in Waverly. To produce his plans and drawings, he set up a shop in some borrowed office space from his former mentor, Edward Davis. His plan called for an American Federal style public building set in the center of a village green with public meeting rooms, a social hall, a U.S. post office, an auditorium, a bowling alley, and a garage. The final design was this brick building with white marble trim and a gambled roof with a clock and bell tower. We know it today as the Waverly Com. It was during this time that Davis invited Lewis to join his firm, and they formally established their partnership. And that lasted for more than 20 years. So Davis and Lewis now come together and they start building things all over the place. They moved their offices into the Scranton Electric Building, and their partnership thrived. Lewis provided the fresh design ideas, and Davis used his long-established reputation and contacts. Lewis took the lead on several new buildings, including the Scranton Gas and Water Company, which was constructed in 1920 and 1921. That's on Jefferson Avenue, right across the street from the Radisson-Lackawanna station. It's a Beaux-Arts style, and it reflects Lewis's influence from the time he was at the University of Pennsylvania and when he was in Italy during the war. So it kind of represents the influence that these things had on him. Lewis is also often noted for using a Roman classical style. Again, he was in Italy. And so the Providence Bank building that you see kind of on the side photo there, in this photo, it's the First Eastern Bank. Now it's home to Black Scranton, but that's another building designed by him that, of course, is more Roman in style. For his 1922 design of the Store and Pfister building, also on our calendar, which is on Courthouse Square. Most recently, it's apartments, but you might remember it as the County Annex building. Lewis chose an English Gothic style, creating a 7-story steel structure clad in limestone with a terracotta complement. The furniture making elves between the first and second floor offer a hint of the business happening inside. Store and Pfister was a furniture making company. And as I said, these elves are also featured on our Looking Up calendar. The classical style is prominent in his 22 design, or the Scranton newspaper building. Which includes large first floor windows with the view of the printing press. Printing press is still there today. I was just down on that block the other day, and they've got some Christmas decorations in the window. Of course, the Times is no longer there, but you could still see the printing press, and now with some festive decorations. Lewis's 1925 Weston Field House opts for a different style. That's a more federal style. Kind of looks like a little Greek temple. In 1930, despite the Wall Street crash and impending depression, Davis and Lewis's firm was commissioned to make alterations to the Traders National Bank building on Wyoming Avenue after it merged with the First National Bank of Scranton. The project included a 10-story office building addition. It also included a steel spire advertising the bank that could be used as a beacon for the new municipal airport in Schultzville. But then the next few years would prove difficult because of the Depression. And at one point, George would actually move to Majorca with his wife and their 6 children because there was a better cost of living. When he returned, he relied on the barter system, collecting debts from people that he did previous work for. So they didn't, completely survive the Depression. They had some hard times. But after enduring the worst of it, George and Edward began to pull out of the hard times by finding work through FDR's Work Progress Administration program. Davis had an established good reputation for building hospitals and schools, so it was logical that he and Lewis would succeed in winning bids for several public projects, including Farview State Hospital for the criminally insane, Clark Summit State Hospital, and the new science building at Keystone Junior College. By the early 40s, Davis began to turn much of the workload over to Lewis. When World War II breaks out, Lewis works with the Scranton Chamber of Commerce to lobby for a defense plant in northeastern Pennsylvania, resulting in the Murray Corporation in South Scranton. Lewis worked with a team of engineers to design a facility which was completed in 6 months and began much needed production to support forces in Japan. So Davis does pass away, and Lewis continues to work. mainly under his own firm, taking on some unique projects like the Bowl of Rice fundraising bowl to support Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist China. He even designed the North Scranton traffic circle. So he continued to work. And then in 1946, he joined Donald Berghauser, another Scranton architect, and they had a partnership in 1958. They formally joined. In 72, they unjoined. And then George continued to work until his death in 1987, often with his son Edward, who I mentioned before. So that happens. But so they did a lot of work, and I focused on them quite a bit. But then as I was researching them, I was looking through a lot of newspapers.com, trying to find other architects to talk about. And that's when I kind of came onto this article about the Scranton Society of Architects, which boasted the city architects were second to none in the country. And I thought this is a good place to start. I want to know a little bit more about this because I had not heard about it before. And the Scranton Society of Architects was formed in 1916 with the slogan, "Make Scranton Grow," copying the Board of Trade slogan at that time, "Watch Scranton Grow." And that's when the sign was on the electric building before it said, or after it said Scranton, the electric city. It went away for a while and they put up "Watch Scranton Grow." According to a March 10th article in the Tribune, practically all of the city architects affiliated with the organization. It was hoped that they would be successful as a social and business venture and make their influence felt in civic affairs of Scranton. In the same month, they elected officers and formally approved a constitution and bylaws. Their constitution laid out a code of ethics for guidance of the architects in their practice and their relations with others. And according to a March 14th article, the object was to organize and unite architects of Scranton in the promotion of the artistic, scientific, and practical efficiency of their profession, and to educate the public on the proper appreciation of art and its allied arts, architecture and its allied arts. The society succeeded for a while with a mission to maintain best practices and discontinue the habit of unskilled architects submitting rough sketches whenever they had the opportunity. They felt this damaged the business reputation and they wanted to kind of put a stop to it. They also offered programs that were open to the public that included lectures, guest speakers, and special exhibitions throughout the 1920s. And then something in the 1930s, something changed. This kind of stops. They're this great kind of cultural, educational, arts organization. They're out there in the public doing these exhibits and having lectures and things. And then it just kind of changes its course a little bit. So the group begins to take a more active role in convincing city officials to hire local architects rather than outside contractors, and to ensure that quality professional architects are being hired and paid fairly. Events came to a head in March of 1932. The society lodged a formal complaint against the Scranton School District regarding the mismanagement of the $5 million bond issue for building purposes, and the district's failure to use Scranton architects to prepare the plans for the new West Scranton Junior High School. Instead, the district had opted to use a structural engineer named Tudor R. Williams. Much of this effort seems to have been part of a larger problem at the time with the Scranton School Board, when a city tax collector had embezzled $48,000 of delinquent school taxes, which resulted in a citywide call for a full audit and accountability. And then the Society of Scranton Architects vanishes. They were there, they were fighting this fight, they were actively showing up in the newspapers for this fight specifically. And then they just disappear. They don't turn up in any of the articles that follow up about the audit of the school board. They're not having lectures or anything so much anymore. They just kind of disappear for a little while, which is a pity because I thought they were a great organization. They do show up again in a little while. The last event I found took place sometime around the same time they were fighting with the school board. On April 4th, they offered one free week-long exhibition at the Chamber of Commerce main lounge, and had architects showcasing nearly 300 drawings a plaster model of the soon-to-be built St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church in Oliphant. That's a picture of the church on the side. And one of the recently completed Holy Cross Church, which is in the Bellevue section of Scranton. Plus, a decorative wall fountain was exhibited by a man named Leonard A. Mitchell, who had won first prize at a high-class sculpture competition in the Beaux-Arts Institute of New York. And he won a trip to Paris for that. ICS President Ralph Weeks gave the address for, he talked about better homes in the housing conference that he had attended in Washington, D.C. So they were still trying to keep it together, but then again, they just weren't there anymore. This isn't the best picture, but this is from that April 1932 conference that they had, and you could see some of the size of the display. They had all of these drawings and pictures up in a display. So just kind of wanted to give you an idea. And they got a lot of press for it. So it was impressive. Then they're gone and they do not reappear until 1941. So they're gone for almost 10 years, they're gone. When they reappear, it's through a 1941 article stating that the Scranton Society of Architects has been perfected when a group of 14 local architects met at the Chamber of Commerce to elect their officers, including their new president, William S. Lowndes. He was the director of the School of Architecture at the International Correspondence School. In the newspaper article the following year, William Lowndes is described as a native of Greenwich Village with an avid interest in all things creative, painting, sculpting, music, all stemming from his chosen profession, which he called the fine art of building beautifully. After graduating from Columbia University, Mr. Lowndes worked for the New York architecture firm before coming to Scranton in 1913 to take charge of ICS's Department of Architecture. He designed several local residences and buildings, probably the most familiar being the Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Sciences, or as we know it today, Scranton Prep. He was a member of the Northeast Pennsylvania chapter of the American Institute of Architects and the Pennsylvania Association of Architects and Engineers. His artistic endeavors included playing the organ and acting as choir master at his church, sketching, drawing, and painting local landscapes in a broad variety of mediums. One of his pastels of Lake Scranton was exhibited at the Everhart Museum. And he even did soap sculpture. So he was truly a Renaissance guy working in all kinds of things. In his home at 424 Monroe Avenue, he had hundreds of his paintings hanging on the walls, which you can see from the article on the right. He retired from ICS in 1945, and when he retired, he expressed his hope that younger men would build the sort of post-war houses they envisioned when they were in the foxholes in the Pacific or in Belgium or in Germany. He said, "A young man's world is on the threshold. Maybe I can help the coming generation to see beyond man-made ugliness and hate, the beauty that lies all around us in nature." He's a great guy. His 1920 design plan for the Women's Institute called for a Gothic limestone structure, featured airy office spaces for multiple instructors, as well as a library and reading room for the staff. The top floor of the central tower served as the office for the vice president, Mary Brooks Pickens, the founder of the Women's Institute, and had a large stained glass testimonial window on the fourth floor that was designed in appreciation for what the school's courses meant to its students. In his plans, Lowndes provided an interior layout that would allow the building to be converted into a hotel, hospital, or residence school should the need ever come up. Today, as I said, it is used as the home of Scranton Prep. An interesting sideline: the $1 million that was raised to build the Women's Institute through sales and demonstrations on how to make the one-hour dress helped to build the building. It was open to staff and students in September of 1921 and was dedicated to the service of women throughout the world. In 1937, the Women's Institute was absorbed into the International Correspondence Schools. The building then served as administrative offices for ICS, as well as housing the studio for WGBI and the Scranton Broadcasting Company, who were the precursors to WYOU television station. The school continued to offer domestic science skills, including a course on tea room management throughout the 1940s. Ultimately, the rise of affordable, accessible, ready-to-wear clothing rendered dressmaking and millinery courses obsolete. As I said, ICS consolidated in the 1950s, moved all of its offices to new facilities over on Kaiser Avenue, and then in 1963, Scranton Preparatory School moved into the building. So it continues today to be a school. After William Loundis's death in 1947, any news on the Society of Architects once again vanishes. But I kept looking through clippings to try to find a few other architects who might be interesting to discuss today, and came across Cyril von Storck. And I think most of us know the von Storck name because of the old von Storck house and the von Storck breaker. It's not an unusual name in Scranton. And Cyril was in fact the grandson of an early North Scranton resident named William von Storck, who lived on Main Avenue near Oak Street in the house that we most recently knew as Noriega Funeral Home. Sadly, the house was demolished in 2012. Cyril was born in Scranton in 1899, graduated from Scranton Tech, and received a degree in architectural engineering from Cornell. He then founded the von Storck architectural firm in 1926. He continued working and in 1951 joined engineer William Berkavich to organize a new firm under the name von Storck and Berkavich in Waverly. The firm started out with only 3 employees to offer architectural and structural and civil engineer services, but in 1956 added mechanical and electrical engineering departments, which enabled them to qualify for larger projects outside of the Scranton area. Clients for whom they designed projects included NASA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Navy Bureau of Yards and Docks, and the Air Force Research Command. Locally, they were responsible for several banks, Clark Summit, Abington High School, and the International Salt Company office building in Clark Summit. But my favorite design that Cyril did was this fashion exhibit case at our headquarters, the Catlett House. He designed it in 1970. On May 12th, 1970, the Tribune did a little story on it, and they stated that the society has a large and distinguished collection of costumes and are in the process of being stored for revolving exhibition in this handsome new walk-up glass and aluminum case designed by architect Cyril von Storck, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Historical Society. So this is an old, this is a current photo. We have currently clothing from the 1960s and 70s on display, and we do use it as a revolving fashion case because we do have so many costumes in our collection. It just goes on, and they date from the very early 1840s right up to the 1980s when you look at the fashions in our collection. So I'm glad that Mr. von Storck was able to help the Historical Society. As I mentioned, in 1941, he was president of the Scranton Society of Architects. He was also a charter member of the Northeast Pennsylvania chapter of the American Institute of Architects, and in 1975 received special recognition from AIA as one of the Northeast PA chapter emeritus members. He died unexpectedly while sailing on a Royal Viking cruise ship out of Panama in 1976. Another architect who stood out for me when I was browsing through newspapers.com looking for people is Vincent Rosanello. Vincent was born in Italy in 1890. He came to Scranton when he was 15 years old to work as a stone cutter at the Carlucci Stone Company. He became a draftsman and was certified in Pennsylvania and New York as an architect in 1921. That same year, after working for architect John Howley, Vincent and Gaylord Price, one of his co-workers at the Howley firm, formed the firm Rosanello and Price, and their headquarters was in the Scranton Life Building. After a few years, the partnership was dissolved and Vincent worked solo. During World War II, he took a position with General Motors in Newark, New Jersey for a short time to assist with the design of a fighter plane called the Avenger. Then he returned to Scranton, and when the war ended, formed a new partnership with his son, Louis. He was a member of the Northeast PA chapter of AIA and was honored as an emeritus member in 1975, along with Cyril von Storck and George M.D. Lewis, and some other men that I might discuss at a future program. He passed away in 1980, And in 1985, his family donated his business papers and drawings to the Balch Institute, which later merged with the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in 2002. His son Louis died in 1988. It's great when you see an architectural company actually take the time to donate their papers somewhere, because we often at the Historical Society get a lot of questions about where to find records, and especially about residences. People want to know what their houses were originally designed as. So Rusinello's work is out there and it is available for research, which is great. He is remembered for the many churches he designed in the city and throughout Lackawanna County, including St. Lucy's, Holy Family, and St. Vladimir's. He lived in Greenridge at 1302 Greenridge Street, and that residence was actually designed by another well-known architect named Ernest G.W. Dietrich. He designed the house in 1887 as the home of Thomas E. Jones. Jones was a banker and a coal operator, so obviously he could put the money into building a nice little castle for himself. A few years ago, Dietrich was the subject of a program that the Historical Society promoted and shared with its members. You can see the title at Architect E.G.W. Dietrich, From Steel City to Electric City. You can find that on the Scranton Public Library's YouTube page and learn a little bit more about him. So today I covered 5 architects. They definitely left their mark on the city of Scranton. There's many more, and I would be happy to come back and talk more about this topic in the future and discuss some of the others that I didn't include today. I want to end with one more architect, though, before I stop, who I discovered when I was preparing for this presentation. Her name is Amina Atit. And in this very dated article from 1968, Mrs. Mina Atit is introduced as a woman architect who recently took a position with Louis Rosanella's firm. She came to Scranton with her husband, Kishore, and for his work as a chemical engineer at the International Salt Company. Mina studied at Baroda School of Architecture near Bombay and worked in that city as an architect to fulfill a 2-year requirement to receive a professional license and become a member of India's Institute of Architecture. She then spent a year working in Switzerland and was a participant in the experiment in international living. She was offered a partnership in an Indian firm, but chose instead to marry and follow her husband to the States. Sadly, I wasn't able to find much on her work and time in Scranton, but do know that she and her husband later purchased a home at 116 Bonnie Drive in North Abington Township in 1968 and lived there till 1977 when they sold it. From a Google search, I found Kishore and Mina had sold a house in Sugar Land, Texas in 2017, and another Google search entry listed her as still living in Sugar Land and that she was 83 years old. I would love to know more about her time here and might pursue it in the future. I'm trying to build up the courage to just pick the phone up and call her because her phone number's on Google. But again, she's 1983, so I don't know how much she'll want to talk to me or what she'll remember and want to share. But that's just a little bit of Scranton architecture. And Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you because my front doorbell just rang. So
As happens. All right. Thanks, Mary Ann.
I'll be right back.
Thanks for filling in there on that program about Scranton architecture. We always say as we're doing them, our architectural tours and any research that we're doing on architecture in Scranton, there's a bit of an overlap there. Buildings in Scranton are either generally it's a safe bet if you assume they were built by Edward Langley or George M.D. Lewis. Like they both cover a lot of ground in Scranton. So it's nice to see others that chimed in later. The majority of downtown Scranton dates to about the 1890s or so, with later buildings chiming in the 1920s and 30s, and then residences all over the city as well. So if anybody else has any questions, I can try and answer them in Mary Ann's absence. There she is, just in time. There is a note in the chat from Troy Watkins. If we had anything about Percy Morris, who was his grandmother's brother, an architect in Scranton. Doesn't sound familiar to me, but I wonder did he come
I
across?
haven't run into him, but I will look for him for sure. Yeah.
Right. He may have been part of that Society of Architects that
I'm
was a
thinking,
mystery in itself.
yeah,
So,
thank
I
you.
had a question.
sure.
Since the ICS was mentioned so many times, um, this is related, but not on architecture. Has there been any presentation on the ICS and its history in the past?
Our annual dinner, maybe in 2018 or 17. Did we record that?
I don't know.
I can't
I know
remember if we
I did a
recorded.
Lackawanna Pastimes episode on the Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Sciences. That was the women's arm of ICS. And that is recorded. That's on our YouTube channel. But we didn't. I don't know if have we done anything on ICS
Not on
specifically.
ICS directly, just on the Women's Institute.
But we've done the Women's Institute, and I said that one is available on our YouTube channel that you could watch.
Thank you. I'll look for it.
Hey, Mary Ann, thanks again for joining us, for sharing that new research about architecture in Scranton. We'll continue as we go. There is another new crop of architects in Scranton. We were just talking the other day about Richard Leonori, one of our past trustees who passed away a few years ago, and buildings that he had designed in Scranton, and some of his mentees who are now working in Scranton and continuing to build and redevelop the city. So there's another program in the offing of continued architecture in Scranton. But it's great to always put a name and a face to a building that we admire downtown. And there is such a great building stock left in Scranton. It's excellent to know a little bit about the men who created some of those spaces. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We do not meet in December. Everybody's too busy with the holidays. So we'll come back again in January for Anthracite Heritage Month. I'll be joined by Bill Conlog, teaching at University of Scranton, who'll be talking about what's under Scranton, especially under the University of Scranton, and by association of what's under the Catlin House right next door. So we'll learn a little bit about what's underground in Scranton for our January program. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great weekend.